Winston, what are you doing, bud? Hey, bud. Oh, hey, Internet. I didn't see you there. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Nancecast. How are you? I'm well. I'm doing great, actually. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. I surely did. In fact, I enjoyed it so much. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm not just revisiting the episode. I'm recording a direct sequel to that episode. Here in a few hours, Mikey's coming back on, and we will be discussing orthogonality in more detail. We initially planned to do a follow-up conversation. We knew we weren't going to have enough time to fit everything into it. And orthogonality being kind of central to our position and kind of our conversation that we're trying to have anyway, really does warrant its own episode. So that's what this is. Intelligence Part 2, the orthogonality episode. So I just finished reading lots of Nick's pieces on orthogonality. Some good stuff in there, a lot of good stuff in there. In fact, while I was reading a note on the diagonal method this morning on Nick's Substack, I decided I will be doing a live streamed exegetical reading of that piece and some of the others here in the near future. Don't know when yet. Still figuring out scheduling and release schedules and all that stuff. But that might happen before this episode is published. It might happen after this episode is published. I don't know. But that'll be really cool. But here in a couple hours, Mikey's coming back on, and we'll be recording part 2 of the intelligence conversation, in which we go into more detail on orthogonality and the Omohundro drives and stuff like that. So thanks for, coming back. Thanks for sticking around. So far, the intelligence episode has been doing great. I hope it continues to do great. I love people's feedback. We're trying to, keep the conversation going and intervene in the conversation. So keep the feedback coming. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep rocking in the free world. And doot. Did I just steal the human serviette? Why can't I remember his name now? Nardwar. I just ripped off Nardwar. Anyway, sit down, strap in, smoke them if you got them, and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This the best podcast ever. Welcome, you're listening to the Nance. Yes.
Boom. Take it away, Johnny. All right, man. So we are back for a direct sequel to the intelligence episode. There's so much in this topic of discussion or whatever. I don't know if we'll ever be able to exhaustively cover everything we want to, but we kind of knew going into it that we would have a sequel going more in detail into orthogonality, and some of these other things that came up. So, I mean, over the last couple days, we've been thinking more about orthogonality and Land's criticism of orthogonality.
Yeah.
We read through the Against Orthogonality piece, which, do we want to read that in the episode?
I mean, it's short enough. It's
like 6
paragraphs.
Yeah.
So I think we should probably read that. I mean, ideally I wish we could read, let's see, it's in Superintelligence. So Bostrom's famous essay on orthogonality got turned into a chapter of Superintelligence. And
is that chapter 7 or chapter 10?
Yeah, it's chapter 7, the superintelligent will. And it's 10 pages long. So maybe sometime we'll just come back and do an exegesis of that.
So here's the deal.
It makes for Say what?
I'm gonna do an exegetical reading of notes on the diagonal method, or a note on the diagonal method. Because when I was reading that today, I realized there's a lot going on, and it's a short enough piece, but there's a lot going on in that piece. So I want to do an exegetical
diagonal based off of your first reading.
Like synthetic dialectics, I think, is how.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Like, what do you think?
I don't know. Like, I'm still unclear. I mean, anytime he uses the term diagonal, I've never been sure, because he didn't do that early on.
Yeah.
And so, but on Twitter, he's always talking about the diagonal, and I haven't read whatever core piece that he wrote about it. But I mean, I've got to at some point. Maybe we'll read that down the road together at some point too, after you do your exegesis. But
yeah, I mean, I think we could definitely do chapter 7 of Superintelligence. We can do note on diagonal method. I mean, we
should do Omohundro's basic AI drives.
Yep.
It's a short piece.
Yep. But these pieces that do a lot of work for these guys, and they're short enough that you could sit down and read all three of the pieces we just named, and a lot of the other work. You could read it all in an afternoon, and find yourself thinking you kind of understand what's going on, but
you gotta let it soak in.
Yeah, you gotta tarry with this stuff, and I want to do that, and yeah, we should definitely do some exegetical reading sessions of these pieces.
That's what I did before we're doing this. I was at the coffee shop and I was reading through all of those pieces that we just mentioned, and I was putting notes under each paragraph, doing my exegetical thing.
I had an insight to, I don't know if it was an insight, but I was struck today when reading this piece on Less Wrong, Nick Land, Orthogonality by Lump in Space. Read through that today.
Should we say Land sent it to me on X?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So after the episode on X, you reached out and said, "Hey Nick, we're going to be talking about orthogonality and your criticism of it. What your recommended readings or whatever?" And he said Xenosystems Orthogonality, or no, Nick Land Orthogonality on Less Wrong, the diagonal piece on Substack, and then just Against Orthogonality in Xenosystems.
And he said, yeah, Against Orthogonality is the most focused discussion of it that he's written. And he talks about it here and there in the pieces throughout Xenosystems, but Against Orthogonality is the one to go to. And then he gave us these other recommendations. And I didn't read the Less Wrong one or the diagonal one. Nance is ahead of me on this, but you tackled both of them.
Yeah, and to be honest, the Less Wrong piece, and that's where I had my little moment when I was reading through that piece towards the end of it. I thought of Horton Hears a Who, like where they're like, we are here, we are here, we are here. That always struck me as like really profound imagery. Like it's just these little people in the face of destruction, in the face of apocalypse, and like their act of resistance is to just assert their existence. They're like, we are here, and that's radical for them. And I was brought to that imagery while reading this Less Wrong piece. Near the end of it, the Lump in Space is talking about the Pythian mandate. And the Pythian mandate, let me read from the text here. In short, this will to think holds that any problem would be better solved by a superior mind. Thus, our overriding priority should be to create superior minds. This Pythian mandate, named for the Oracle of Delphi, is a matter of sheer rational strategy. To proceed otherwise is to not take our problems seriously. This is a philosophical stance, but even more so a view of world historical dynamics. Whatever we truly want leads through the oracle. So in the end, the oracle is what we really want. And I take that to be saying, well, if the computer can do it better than the human, then we are kind of commanded to let the computer do it, and to say us humans are not good enough, so let's let the computers take over.
Basically, the Landian ethics. We want to talk like
yeah, like on my first reading, that's what I got out of it. This Pythian mandate. And if you're a college student and the large language model can write the paper better than you, then according to this logic, you are commanded to let the large language model write the piece for you, and you don't write it. And so it is this replacement logic. And I was like, no, I want to be like the little who's in Whoville. We are here, damn it. And yes, there are things computers and robots can do better than us already, but it matters to me to do these things, and it matters to me that we continue to do these things. And it's just like if you have a kid and they have to go to soccer practice or a dance recital, you could hire somebody to pick them up and take them there and sit there on the sidelines and bring them home. Like, you could hire a driver to do that for you, and they would do it better because they're a professional driver. They'll be more safe on the car ride there and on the car ride back. They could do the task better than you could. But it matters to the child and it matters to the parent that the parent takes the child to the dance recital and spends time with the child and brings the child home. Like that symbolic, that sentimental value does exist for the human, and it doesn't seem to exist in this hyper-functional, hyper-utilitarian world. And that's a problem.
It's like Todd McGowan's always saying, the source of value is sacrifice. Now, it's a certain people might disagree with that, but there's a certain truth to it, right? Somebody cares about you if they're willing to sacrifice their time, their energy, their money, their attention, because they could be investing those in other things. And so the very fact that they sacrifice those things for you indicates a symbolic bond. You stand out for them. You're special to them. And so it's not just, let the robot do it. By letting the robot do it, you're not doing it. It corrodes the symbolic bond based on you sacrificing for the other. Now, of course, there's things like, let's let robots do a lot of things. Like, I mean, let's automate the economy. I'm fine with that. Automate production,
chores,
automate distribution.
Menial tasks, meaningless tasks, stuff like this. But we should be automating to free us up for these sentimental values and for these symbolic moments and to actually engage with this sacrificial value as opposed to this utilitarian value. But this logic, and so it's Lumpen Space is writing this, it's Nick Land's ethic, but I also think it's Bostrom's ultimate position too, because this section of the piece
all these guys, the analytical types. Yeah,
it's all utilitarian. So this is actually coming out of the section of superintelligence. I think it's chapter 10 where Bostrom is talking about Oracle AIs and stuff, and I think it's Bostrom's view too that we should ultimately, like, the Pythian mandate stands, and that is just reducing us all to utility and function, and a positivistic
in framing.
Yes, positivistic functionalism rather than this this negative sentimental value, symbolic exchange. We need to speak symbolic exchange.
I love that.
Yeah.
It'll take some getting used to say that one.
It's hard to say.
It looks good written on a page.
It looked damn good. Good. So that's really the the majority of what I got out of reading Nick Land Orthogonality on Less Wrong. The diagonal piece, there's a lot going on. It's like I said,
You said that one was theoretically richer and denser than Against Orthogonality is kind of a rant to me. I mean, sorry, Nick, but you're just kind of basically saying how much you dislike the concept. It's the Nietzschean influence. It's Antichrist 2.0.
Fair enough. I do think there's a simple-minded version of orthogonality that I think it's right to push back on, but excuse me, I got the burps. Taking this position of like there is some fundamental difference, there is some qualitative difference between human intelligence and machine intelligence. Mintelligence and intelligence are separate.
Yeah.
Orthogonality or separation becomes one kind of inroad into discussing the many qualitative differences between these types of intelligence. So I think it is fair enough to push back on orthogonality. Like if that were your end all be all and that was like your one defeater, and maybe Omohundro with the 6 drives, maybe that is a robust enough framework to defeat orthogonality if you didn't really take it further.
You know what the issue is, though? I mean, Bostrom is the great orthogonalist. Orthogonalist?
Yeah.
I think it's orthogonalist, right? Bostrom's the great orthogonalist. And yet, in chapter 7 of Superintelligence and in the famous piece on orthogonality, he lists some of the Omohundro drives.
Yep.
They're in there. He talks about them. And I mean, he doesn't call them that, but he talks about resource acquisition. And here, let me just list what he's, so instrumental convergence, which is to say, if you get something smart enough that it's having different goals, it can learn that there's certain sub goals or protocols it can follow to help maximize its ability to fulfill these different goals. And so he talks about self-preservation and goal content integrity, cognitive enhancement, which is intelligence optimization. That Wayne's talking about technological perfection and resource acquisition. So he is talking about these goals or sub goals as conditions for superintelligence. And so here's the thing. You and I haven't had a chance to have this discussion, but for the last couple of months, I've been thinking about the transcendental a whole lot and trying to expand on it and really understand what Land was doing with it. So look, the transcendental, it's a Kantian term. It refers to the conditions of experience, the structural necessary conditions of experience. So for Kant, it's, time and space as the forms or matrices of perception. For understanding, it's the concepts of substance, the concept of unity, the concept of causality. These are the fundamental epistemological criteria we use to structure our experience of things. And so he calls this the transcendental. But the philosophers who came after him, who were inspired by him, they end up rethinking the transcendental in various ways. So Heidegger thinks the transcendental becomes being, right? He views it in terms of being, which is this background matrix of intelligibility that is precognitive and pre-theoretical. It's like a immersed environment that you're in that gives things their intelligibility. At least for early Heidegger, that's it. Deleuze, he comes along and he rethinks the transcendental, and instead of it being ideal, instead of it being the structures of our cognitive apparatus, he views the transcendental as part of the empirical field, which is weird from a Kantian perspective. But when you realize that virtualities and intensities are part of the empirical field, so the basic example is right now I'm in my library here. There's all these books. if the temperature went up 1,000 degrees, or if it went up 10,000 degrees, all these actualities are gone. I'm gone. Everything's gone, because these actualities can only exist in the state they're in within a very limited range of temperature, of intensity. And so the continuum of temperature that enables the things around us in the world to exist as actuality is very limited. And it's the whole thing. Like, life on Earth works and emerges because we're at the right distance from the sun. So the intensity is the right level of intensity to produce life, right? We're too close to the sun, we burn up. We're too far away from the sun, no life on Earth, everything's frozen. So intensity is this thing that's part of the physical empirical field, but it makes possible experience because our sense organs, our brains, our minds are all conditioned by this level of intensity and can only emerge physically on the basis of this range of intensity, right? So it's the transcendental condition of experience. Now, here's what's interesting with Land and CCRU. They start to realize how technology can come to restructure experience. Now, this is much more of like a Marshall McLuhan type of position, even though they don't talk about McLuhan much. But this is what Land is going on about with Bitcoin. He thinks Bitcoin, with its ability to make absolute succession possible, he basically thinks it's a technology that instantiates perfected Kantian time into the world. So it actually remodifies or reconfigures time as such, at least time in the world that we exist in, right? So now I've started working out this concept in more of a I'm trying to detail it out to the best of my ability. And also Anna Greenspan, other member of CCRU, she wrote this book, Capitalism's
Transcendental Time Machine.
Transcendental Time Machine. That's right. Yeah. So they don't use the term, but I've coined a new neologism I've been using. I haven't told you about, but I think we got to talk about the texendental. And it is about how technology is constantly reshaping the structures of our basic experience. And I think this neologism in particular is helpful because it pinpoints the role of technology. If we just talk about the transcendental, we're going to just keep thinking about Kant and, causality and substance and unity and all of that. Whereas the texendental gets us thinking about the way that our basic experience of the world is being reshaped and redefined by new forms of technology. And I'm sorry, but the smartphone did this weird remodification of experience where you're constantly awaiting a text or a notification. It reshapes your experience at a very basic level, and you can lose sight of that because you just get used to it. But I'm sorry, like, people our age, we grew up, we did not have this as a default setting of our experience of the world. So something came along and texendentally reshaped our basic experiential default setting. And so that's what these Omohundro drives are getting at, and why Land is interested in them, because they're the texendental condition of superintelligence. And so they're trying to think through what, because Bostrom says this. He's like, look, yes, a super intelligence is going to be radically other. He doesn't use that term, but that's coming from our continental philosophy background. It's going to have a radical alterity to it, but nevertheless, we can still predict certain things about it. And it's based on these predictions, these predictabilities, that we can basically think our way to some of the basic drives or impulses, if you want to use that term, that the superintelligence would have. And so for Nick, though, well wait, because that we'll read the piece and then we'll go into that. But
yeah,
you want to do anything before we go into that? Actually, here's the thing. I do want to say this, because I was going to read this last week. This is actually a paragraph from my book, but I think it's relevant to mintelligence. And you and I have kind of talked about this before. but I think intelligence and intelligence, which for somebody who didn't watch the last conversation, this is the distinction Nance and I have created between machinic intelligence, mintelligence, and human intelligence, intelligence. And there's semiotic stuff going on there that we talked about in the last episode, so I'm not going to rehash it. But basically, I think one of the components of this that we didn't really go into last week is that I think intelligence is fundamentally geared towards stakes.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth. Like, sure, an AI can understand the concept of losing a game, right? So Deep Blue, the chess AI, I understand it had no problem understanding it could lose against the human. And AlphaGo, the Go AI program, understands it can lose. But does that mean there are stakes involved for it? Right now, I would argue there isn't. There's no there. It doesn't have the weight of stake or of existential stakes.
That's
on it.
Existential stakes, because it's a win-loss condition in its.
It's not going to have an existential crisis if it loses.
Yeah, but for the human, always inside of our experience, everything has existential stakes. Everything. Dude, there's times I think back to totally meaningless, incidental shit, like meeting someone new and I fumbled my introduction or whatever, or I smelled bad that day, like meaningless little things that they probably don't ever think about, but for me they still haunt me, like because there's existential stakes attached to everything we do, everything, and machines don't have that. Now I think I don't think either one of us is making the claim that this is necessarily human and this cannot ever happen in a machine. One of the comments on the intelligence episode, I felt after I read the comment that this person thought we were making some type of like necessary claims about intelligence versus min-intelligence, and I don't think either one of us are saying this is a necessary thing. This is just a description of machinic intelligence and how it differs from the type of human intelligence that we're out here to defend. Subjectivity, agency, ethical being. These are all part of intelligence. And it's not to say that we're necessarily prescribing these things can never emerge in synthetic substrates. And I think they will. I think we're fairly close, relatively close, for things emerging in other places other than just human gray matter. But we're currently not
trying
there.
To think a difference.
Yeah, that's it. We're not making prescriptions. We're describing these differences, these qualitative differences that we see. That we just read the Pythian mandate. Our human lives, our human subjective existential experience is meaningless. If the robot does it better, you are, commanded, let the robot do it because the robot does it better than the human. Like, we're talking about what you're losing when you prescribe the human away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, there's a whole lot to that, but
yeah.
So the film that, to me, really gets at this difference between, as far as the existential disposition towards stakes is concerned, is War Games.
Oh shit!
Total classic. One of my favorites from growing up in the 80s. But so what I said here, I'm just going to read it instead of trying to paraphrase it. Perhaps no film better presents the cybernetic simulation of symbolic exchange better than War Games, 1983. In it, a young hacker named David, played by Matthew Broderick, accidentally enters into a game with a secret military defense AI program named Joshua. The game is Global Thermonuclear War, which simulates a nuclear war between the USA and the Soviet Union. David is playing as the Soviet Union, launches missiles against the U.S. The problem is that NORAD is alerted to this game, which is mistaken for a real situation. That is, they become convinced that the Soviet Union is actually sending nukes our way. Finally, right before America decides to launch its own actual missiles, the game is revealed to be a simulation. The point, however, is that Joshua was never playing against David from a symbolic position. All calculation, no stakes. Land, despite defining intelligence on occasion as competency at games, doesn't really seem to get the symbolic dynamic we have towards AI, but which it lacks towards us. This is our power to fight it. The human advantage over the computer is that we have access to symbolic intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue, is that when we talk about this orthogonality thesis, it's like, oh, does it understand goals? Okay, even if it understands goals, does it understand stakes? Does it matter? I mean, does it matter in this existential, emotional, gripping way? No, or at least I don't think it does.
I think something that we kind of came upon in the intelligence episode that for me anyway, it's very simple and it's very powerful when we were talking about the difference between Terminator and T2. And right now, these machines that are just positivistic, they could recognize, oh yeah, they're human and yeah, their lives have meaning and this and that. But if they are given some kind of mandate that like they're put up with a choice, that they have to make a choice between turning us into paperclips or not turning us into paperclips, like when they view us as just a collection of atoms and energy fields and flows, because like necessarily constitutively we are that. And if you bracket out the interiority and if you bracket out existential life and existential stakes, we are nothing more than matter in motion. So these machines will view us all as matter in motion. And I don't think it's that difficult to envision a scenario in which they interact with us as nothing more than matter in motion. Like that's the thing. We're out here talking about interiority. We're out here talking about the split and contradiction and negation. Like we are, by virtue of the fact that we are what we are not, we understand interiority, and we understand that people have subjective lives, and there's a lot more going on than just the material. So when we make calculations about expenditure and about risk and about things that affect people, we don't just account for the matter, the atoms that make up humans. We account for the interiority and the existential stakes. Machines don't. And like the difference, the stark difference between Terminator and Terminator 2, I think is a great, just quick and easy way to demonstrate like there's something going on. And what changed was the negation. Like when the T-1000 was negated, when it was set at odds with itself, that's when it started to have sentimental value.
And even though, again, he says, I understand now why you cry, but it's something I can never do. But still, this gap has been opened up in him. Yep. And I think one of the later films, besides T1 and T2, the other ones aren't cinematic masterpieces, to say the least. But I think, is it Terminator Genesis is where Linda Hamilton comes back? I think it's the sixth one. I've lost count, but the most recent one with Linda Hamilton. So, spoiler alert if you want to. But basically, if I remember correctly, because I kind of half watched it one night when it was on cable. Yes, I still have cable. Somehow the Terminator, one of the Terminators gets sent back again, but he stays here long enough
She
and
calls
he
him
does
Pop.
learn to have empathy. Like, yeah, it takes hold. Like what we see at the end of T2, where that Terminator, like the split had opened, but it couldn't develop much. The more input, like Johnny Five, input, right from Short Circuit. This Terminator gets enough input over the years being back here that it does basically develop human feeling. If I think that's what happens, if I'm remembering it correctly.
Yeah,
But here's the
I
thing.
think so. I think
Here's
you're
the
right.
thing. It doesn't matter if I'm correct or not, because there could be a Terminator movie where that's the plot.
Yeah.
It's like one comes back and given enough time and enough learning, it does actually become a full-blown split subject just from taking in more and more information and getting more familiarized with us.
Well, and I think, even if it's not a plot, I think it is the plot, because she calls him Pops, I think, in that one. But like, even if it's not the plot, like it is illustrating the point we're raising. Like, it's not like we're out here saying like, see, Terminator is telling the future. Although I think parts of Terminator are uncannily hyperstitional, but we're using it as a framework to kind of discuss, once again, the qualitative difference that we're positing, and that is supported by continental philosophy and theories of subjectivity and theories of mind. Even there is something different between mintelligence and hintelligence, and even guys like Nick Bostrom, who is chief orthogonalist, seems to revert back to this hyper utilitarian logic at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's
and
why
we're saying let's not do
bring
that.
Theory of the subject into this.
Let's not be utilitarians. Let's consider the subject.
And that's the thing. Even, it's funny, despite these incredibly strong differences between utilitarian ethics and Kantian ethics or deontology, they're both forms of calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah, one is this kind of almost inductive thing, or based on the greatest happiness principle, and then you try to apply. Well, okay, let me tally it up. What situation provides the most heat-ons for the most? Okay, but the Kantian thing, while it's supposed to not rely on any type of empirical experience or anything like that, it's supposed to be a priori and necessary. Nonetheless, it's still a kind of abstract calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Can I lie? No, I can't universally lie, because if everyone always lied, no one ever told the truth, then I couldn't lie, because nobody would ever believe what I'm saying, because nobody ever told the truth. It's a contradiction.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that how ethics works though?
No, it's not. That's the thing. Like, that's the thing about ethics is ethics is this space where there is no prescriptions. Like, ethics are this emergent playing field where we interact as ethical beings, and it's like, hey, we're people and we're figuring it out. Machines don't do that. We are the remainder. We are that which resists signification and totalization. So you can't say, hey, I have this math equation that's going to give you the correct answer every single time. Yeah, man. Like, we're not robots yet, people. Let's stop. Let's not listen to this Pythian mandate, and let's not try to reduce everything to a base calculation, and let's take up some agency. That's the point.
So, okay, let's this whole thing with orthogonality. The reason we're doing this episode is because we got into the orthogonality thesis last time, but we both knew that we didn't really get into it the way we really had planned. And so, but I said a couple things there that I feel like I should say again if you're watching this and you didn't watch the last episode. So, just to clarify, the orthogonality thesis is really a thesis developed by Nick Bostrom. There's other AI theorists who defend it, but it's really Bostrom's thing. Orthogonality, just for the sake of intelligibility, what it really means is separation. And so Nance and I have kind of taken to calling it the separation thesis because it just helps make the whole thing make sense. And so what the orthogonality or separation thesis posits is a separation, a gap between intelligence on the one hand and values or goals on the other. And at first you can go, well, does that make sense or does it not? Because you would say, well, they're tied up together, aren't they? Can you have intelligence without it being goal directed? Maybe, maybe not. Can you have a goal or a value? By a value, it's something you're trying to achieve. Can you have that without having some sort of intelligence or ability to achieve it? You could say it's that all goals are intelligence oriented. But the point is, what Bostrom's point is this. There's a level of separation in the sense of, and this is what makes it orthogonal in the way he's using the term, you can have incredibly high levels of intelligence, and you can also have a goal that's a very mundane, simple goal, right? And the question is, the levels of either can be drastically different.
They're independent variables.
Yes, independent variables. And so Bostrom's example is this: imagine telling a super intelligent agent, given it the task or the goal of producing paper clips. Bostrom's point, and it doesn't really come out in his own words, but the point is this: giving a super intelligent entity any goal, any mandate, any prompt to do something is basically like giving it to a black box. You have no idea of how it will go about attempting to achieve the goal. So what that means is if you say, hey, do something simple like produce paper clips, the AI with its radical alterity when it comes to intelligence, its radical otherness, its incomprehensibility, it could say, well, the most efficient way to produce paper clips is to use all of the atoms in human bodies or in the earth itself. And so it paper clips all of us. It turns the earth itself into nothing but paper clips. And this is the problem, is like you would approach prompting the AI with human anthropocentric
That's it.
forms of meaning and expectations. And the point is, no, you cannot begin to predict what this black box will do in trying to achieve the goal you give it. So it's a complete shot in the dark. It's a total existential risk, environmental risk, and basically you should have like an existential crisis the moment you're given a super intelligence any goal to achieve, because you just cannot predict how it will go about doing that. But that's Nick's problem. That's where Nick has a big issue with this that we'll get into. But it is helpful for sake of context. So this separation between intelligence and goals, or intelligence and values, this is not reducible to these other philosophical distinctions, but it has a lot in common with them. So in philosophy, there are these famous distinctions. One is Hume's, which is the is-ought distinction. And Hume famously pointed this out. He goes, anytime I see philosophers arguing, they'll start off talking about states of affairs using the word is. And they're describing states of affairs in the world. But they quickly slide into doing normative proclamations, saying how things ought to be. And for Hume, you just cannot infer an is from an ought or an ought from an is, that they're separate or orthogonal in that way. And you have to be clear. You, like when you're making descriptive statements, you got to stay in descriptive mode and not slide into being normative. Same with being normative, right? And so you have that. Another way to talk about this, or the Kantian way to talk about it, is the distinction between facts and values. And so this distinction, and I said last time, it's also, you can kind of see Aristotle's distinction between efficient cause and final cause
Yeah.
at play here.
Yep.
And so the final cause of a thing is what it's attempting to become, what it's moving towards, what it's trying to become or fulfill. The efficient cause is the way it goes about doing that. And so for Aristotle, he thought final causes or purposes were ingrained in things themselves or in their modes of becoming. Modern science only thinks in terms of efficient causality. What actually causes this to affect that, right? Like, when it comes to, what do you got there?
Oh, wrong book. This is System of Objects. I thought,
Oh, okay.
This one.
There it is. Yeah. Classic.
In that, going into final and efficient cause, like the in-framing is...
Tell people what that means.
So in-framing is this mode of revealing, the mode of modernity, the mode of technology, or the essence of technology, although even saying essence of technology is a bit weird, but Heidegger is aware where he's talking about questioning the essence. Anyway, in framing is the get down in modernity and the way we react to the world around us. It's the way we view things. In framing reduces everything to, it's called a standing reserve or potential utility. So you could even say future exchange value, because ultimately utility is quantified in the world we live in today in modernity by exchange value. So in framing is the way people view the world and understand the world. Thank you, technology, where everything is reduced to a standing reserve of utility or value.
It's this spontaneous default setting we have in the world to immediately encounter things as resources. And it's resource ontology, if you want to talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's viewing things in a hyper instrumentalized way. Things are there to be utilized, but
and ultimately
they also have
expended.
potential to become useful. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And that's where this is totally tangential, but that's where I, taking Bataille and Marx, further problematize in framing and say it's not just exchange value, it's ultimately waste. And I think Baudrillard is hip to this too. It's ultimately in framing, if we're going to stick with that language, although I want different language, but the mode, the default setting for people in the world we live in today is to view things as ultimately waste. Like things are commoditized before they're even revealed to us. We just have, like, that is the mathematic. We could even say this is the new transcendental structure is value, utility.
Yeah.
So when we come upon a thing in the world, we view it through this lens of utility. So when you say utility what'd you say? Resource ontology.
Resource ontology. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, utility ontology is pretty close to it too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and look, all these guys are thinking along this problem in similar but different ways. So, but basically, yeah, you start forming these connections between capital and inframing and instrumental rationality.
Yep.
And utilitarianism and this whole thing. Yeah, it all becomes a matter of calculation of resources. And for Baudrillard, at least, real meaning is produced outside of that value system. Everything we're talking about, in framing capital, exchange value, instrumental rationality, all of that is tied up with what Baudrillard calls value with a capital V. or the value system. And for him, the thing that exists outside of it is symbolic exchange, which is a different form of how to make meaning, how to forge meaning. Yep. And you could easily say how to make symbolic value. He just doesn't want the term value associated with this other thing. But we could talk about resource value, utilitarian value versus symbolic value.
I think for bringing the conversation public or whatever, like for everyday parlance, like I do think the symbolic value or sentimental value is a good way to talk about it because it demonstrates the qualitative difference. Now, I also understand and respect why Baudrillard doesn't want to use the same language, but I think for everyday people, symbolic value is a home run because it shows you value right there.
Just has negative connotations for him, and it doesn't for the rest of us. And so, yeah, I think it's just helpful to make a distinction. I mean, if we're being strictly Baudrillardian here, the distinction, if he would allow us to use the term in both ways, it would be symbolic value versus semiotic value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because semiotics is all about this kind of programmed totalitarian sign system that integrates all things into it, negates alterity, negates other forms of value. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's caught up with the whole commodity logic.
Yep.
So, but that whole thing, to bring it back, this question of is and ought, are they really separate? It's a tricky thing to deal with. There's very few things in the history of philosophy that are basically accepted as philosophical truths or doctrines. The is-ought distinction it's a contender for that. Most philosophers accept it. One of our favorite thinkers, though, problematizes this, which, of course, I'm referring to Levinas. I set this aside, and then we didn't go into it last week, but let me just...
Yeah. Hume. Levinas on Hume.
So, yeah, years ago, I was thinking through this, and... So here's what I wrote. I mean, we're going back 10 years. So if I wrote this now, it would sound different. But I think this would be fun to work through real quick. Shouldn't take too long. Okay. Well, the positivists dogmatically accepted Hume's is-ought distinction. In fact, this distinction has pretty much crystallized into a philosophical doctrine. But perhaps this distinction covers up something more basic and more important. In his work, A Treatise on Human Nature, Hume says, in every system of morality which I have hitherto met with, I have always remarked that the author proceeds for some time in the ordinary ways of reasoning and establishes the being of a God or makes observations concerning human affairs. When all of a sudden I am surprised to find that instead of the usual copulations of propositions, is and is not, I meet with no proposition that is not connected with an ought or an ought not. This change is imperceptible, but is, however, of the last consequence. For as this ought or ought not expresses some new relation or affirmation, 'tis necessary that it should be observed and explained, and at the same time that a reason should be given. For what seems altogether inconceivable, how this new relation can be a deduction from others which are entirely different from it. Which is to say, you're not going to deduct the ought from the is. And yet, philosophers just move from one to the other. And it's almost like a philosophical glitch in how humans reason, according to Hume. Right? So, to sum up, Hume believed that an inference from how things are, the is, to how things should be, the ought, is a faulty one. This leads to an insurmountable gulf between facts and values. For Hume, values only exist in human minds, not in nature. Okay? Nietzsche believed, like Hume, that morality is simply a human construction that really doesn't correspond to anything in reality. Nietzsche argued in his On the Genealogy of Morals that morality, the concepts of good and evil, emerged out of the resentment slaves felt towards their masters. The slaves had no way to overthrow their masters in terms of physical or political strength. Instead, they had to invert or reevaluate the values of their masters. Nietzsche famously said, "There are no moral phenomena, but only moral interpretations of phenomena." Could it be that Nietzsche was just a poor phenomenologist? Now, the reason I said that is Levinas would problematize this idea that there are no moral or ethical phenomena, right? So Emmanuel Levinas strongly disagreed with Nietzsche. He says, the first word of the face is the thou shalt not kill. It is an order. There is a commandment in the appearance of the face, as if a master spoke to me, unquote. If Levinas is correct, then there are moral phenomena, namely faces. Levinas's phenomenological descriptions also undermine Hume's is-ought distinction, since the ought is not inferred from or mediated by the is. The ought is the is, i.e., it is an immediate fact. Levinas would say the truth is simply that there are moral phenomena which get contaminated in reflection by being dephenomenalized through non-moral interpretations. Another example of a moral phenomenon is a cry for help. When you hear someone cry out for help, you are immediately drawn to help the person. And it's only when you start to reflect upon the possible dangers that you could face in helping the other that you might fight the immediacy of the ethical solicitation within the cry for help. We can become blinded to these kinds of moral phenomena through our particular ideologies. Levinas's phenomenological descriptions can lead one to hold to the following maxim: first faces, then ideas. Now, to kind of juxtapose this, let's look at a quote from Ayn Rand and then one from Levinas. So Ayn Rand says in Atlas Shrugged, "I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another man, nor ask another man to live for mine." Emmanuel Levinas in Totality and Infinity says, "In welcoming the other, I welcome the on high to which my freedom is subordinated." So what the two quotes do, it just shows this radical difference in how human beings can relate to the other, right? And so just to finish this up, here we see the absolute difference between privileging economics over ethics and privileging ethics over economics. Personally speaking, I am on Team Levinas all day. Ethics precedes economics. The face of the other is an argument against the existence of capital. To see the face is to become an anti-capitalist. It is to see the other as worthy of far more than just a life wasted in alienated wage labor.
Dude, that's so good. That's so good.
I never did anything with that, but but I agree with the majority of what I wrote all those years ago. But I think that's helpful. And so, look, the point is, a whole world of philosophers would give us shit and go, "You fucking dipshits." There is no immediate ought. But Levinas would just say, "Sorry, guys, you're not doing the phenomenology of the ethics of the other."
Yeah.
And you're talking yourself out of it because it's much easier to slide out of these duties we have to the immediacy of the other. Those forms of immediacy put a lot of duty on us.
Yep.
And it's not easy to bear that. And so we rationalize it with forms of totalization, which is the thing he has an issue with. And to add to the capital, value, in framing, instrumental rationality, they're all modes of totalization. For Levinas.
I think if we take to try to apply like a transcendental logic from goals to, I don't know, like trying to say, okay, so a machine has these goals. We're gonna give it these 6 Omohundro drives, and treat these Omohundro drives as like transcendental conditions for this machine actualizing itself. Because that's basically the argument. The argument is saying, guys, it's okay. We don't have to worry. These AIs have these 6 drives. Everything will be okay. Everything will work out in the end. So I would say that's granting them the status of some kind of like transcendental mode or modality of AI. I would say the ethical encounter with the other is the transcendental condition necessary for like ethical being. Like that is what separates intelligence from intelligence. The fact that we are confronted with our immediate duty to the other, because we do recognize and there's this moment. I've been talking about it for months at this point. It's like a ping pong game. I smack the ping pong ball to you, you smack it back at me. We are thus engaged. So like my presence and my actuality as what I view myself as a human subject, that's necessarily predicated on having that recognition with the other first. So I think when I talk about, oh, more human than human, and I make recourse to Philip K. Dick, like, and I'm talking about, it's not that we're being replaced by machines, it's that we're turning ourselves into utilitarian machines. It's because we are casting off that immediate duty to the other. We ourselves are becoming inhuman. Like that's what's really at stake here when we say it's all about utility and it's all about maximization and optimization and this and that. That's a denial of the ethical encounter. And if we continue to go through life denying ethical encounters, we saw it. World War II, I think, was a perfect example of all of Europe refusing the ethical encounter. Like it was just like, turn everybody into numbers. Let's just do maximum resource extraction, maximum political
humans are
efficacy.
statistics.
Humans are statistics. Thank you, IBM. And that's like, that is why I make sometimes sensational sounding claims where accelerationism, that's why I tie it back to Italian futurism, because that's where this logic really took hold, where like at the peak, at the zenith of modernity and industrialization, people were able to deny the ethical encounter on an industrial scale. And what did we get out of it? We got, modernity. We got the 20th century. So I think this ethical encounter with the other is the transcendental pull that makes us human. And if we can't honor that, then we have become machines. And if we can't stand on that hill and say, no, it is undeniable, this encounter with the other, that is what makes us human. I love that, dude. I want to write a lot more about specifically Levinas and this ethical encounter being the condition of humanness. Because I feel like we're at this point in history where you are able to totally deny the ethical encounter. You can go through your life without encountering the other all day, every day. You go to work, you're on your phone all day long. Everybody's in frame. You got your favorite podcaster, your favorite rock group from the 80s released a new album. Your favorite rapper from the 90s is having a comeback. Like everything is just waiting for you. The internet is this vast resource of potential.
Well, Baudrillard viewed it all in terms of sameness.
Yes.
Which is an attempt to neutralize the alterity of the other, of difference.
To make it safe. To make it safe for the self-contained.
And we would say it's to neutralize negativity.
Yes. And that's why this positivistic rationale is actually a threat to humankind. So
here's what they don't get. Look. when we approach things in terms of symbolic exchange, or we approach things in terms of human meaning, what we're saying is that this hyper this logic of hyper efficiency wants to smooth things out entirely, make everything functional. And for us, that's precisely to undo the human. Like, all the good stuff of being human is in these forms of giving ourselves too much trouble, of excess, of things that ultimately harm us. This is death drive. This is jouissance. This is waste. This is expenditure. This is sacrifice. And all of these things that seem to just be irrational or anti-utilitarian. It's like that's where the good stuff's at.
That we get to exercise our agency. It's like, I know this Twinkie's gonna kill me, but I'm gonna eat it, damn it, because I want to enjoy the taste of this Twinkie.
I'm doing it right now. Like, is it good that I smoke this Black and Mild?
Yeah, is it good that I chew tobacco?
But Lacan's point, and this is where people would have problems with this shit, but I guess as a Lacanian Zizeki, I just accept it, which is to say, yeah, but without these forms of self-destructive enjoyment, life isn't meaningful.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Boy.
Dude.
And that's the thing, though. And the question is, and again, Isabel Millar poses this in her great book on psychoanalysis and artificial intelligence. Look, we are beings of jouissance, of death drive, and we have the most intelligence of anything on this planet. Can there be something that's more intelligent than us without this enjoyment and self-destruction written into it? That's a big question, because if death drive is at the heart of our ontology and we're the beings with this high level of intelligence, it's very easy to start making the claim that our form of intelligence, of human intelligence, is structurally dependent on these ways that we undermine ourselves, and that the intelligence of our unconscious is one geared towards self-destructive enjoyment. And that is what has propelled our level of intelligence, is how we trick ourselves into enjoying things that we at the egoic rational level would not want to identify with. And that's to me, that's baked into human intelligence. And so if you create a level of intelligence that's our equal or greater, but it also doesn't have any sense of the enjoyment of self-destruction or self-undermining, it will not get us, and it will see us as completely irrational. I'm sorry. I mean, this is in the Matrix, right? Like at the end where Agent Smith is talking to Morpheus, and he's like, all other species strike up a kind of homeostatic relationship with their environment, but not you guys. And his point is, like, he's saying there's something with you guys based around self-destruction and excess in a way that we don't see in other species. And that's a problem for us. And it's a problem because he's only thinking in terms of, at that time at least, in terms of hyper efficiency, smooth functionality, totalized control, etc. And the whole point for us is that we are subjects of the law. We understand this level of conformity, but there's always this remainder that will not allow us to just be perfect ideological puppets. And if you think that's possible for us, all you have to do is truly try your best to just solely be a Christian, or just solely be a Republican, or just solely be a Buddhist, and you'll find out real quick how you're not capable of doing that. There's always something in you more than you that undermines your ability to just be one and the same with whatever symbolic mandate you've taken up. There's always something that's going to undermine your ability to be a good teacher. that it's something baked into you, and oftentimes it helps drive you on as a teacher, but nonetheless, it's always going to be something that gets in the way. It doesn't matter if you're a therapist, it doesn't matter if you're a personal trainer. There's always going to be something that prevents you from being the perfect instantiation of these things, and that is because you are never fully one or identifiable with your social position.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's
or
that's
with your
what
coding,
it's all,
so to speak.
That's what it's all about. That's what being a human is all about. To defend the human is to defend this type of negation or this lack or this ontological gap, or like whatever language you use to describe the fact that we are all that we are, plus exactly that which we are not. Like that is what makes up the human. A equals A plus not A. That is what it is to be a human, and that's where ethics comes from, and that's where the good comes from, and the bad, and that's where efficacy and self-actualization and self-determination and all these things come from, and free will. And free will is a huge question. I'm some kind of compatibilist either way. Like, I don't think we need to come down hard on either side of that question. But like, that's it. That's what is at stake here. It's not just to say, I've been encountering this term human chauvinist a lot recently. We've been reading a lot of this stuff about intelligence and transhumanism and cosmism and all this stuff. And human chauvinist is a term that gets bandied about a lot of the times. I feel like they're using it in a derogatory fashion. I think I would be comfortable having the term human chauvinist applied to me. I am hoping to discover or take part in a robust humanism here at the end of history. So yeah, I do, because what I mean by human is this ethical agent. I don't mean the form. I don't mean Homo sapiens sapiens. I mean, we talked about how absurd it would be to tie our humanity to our form. Like, yes, we are these animals. Yes, we are these creatures, but that's just one thing that makes up the human. And the bigger part, the more important part, I think, is the ethical being. And I think a lot of people, maybe like the first time you hear that, you disagree with it or whatever. I think most people agree with that. I think most people have some idea of spirituality or the soul, or you have some cosmology where there is this mystical essence in the human. You call it soul or spirit, or you call it divinity or whatever. It's this ethical dimension, this ethical quality. The fact that we are not just math equations, the fact that we operate in a very mathematical way, and that's what allows us to get through the day and see to our needs. But then we have this whole other world where we're self-overcoming and we're self-sabotaging and we're standing in our own way and we're hurting ourselves and even hurting the people we love. But then we have to deal with that. Like, we make our bed and then we have to lie in it. That's what being a human is all about. I don't want to find myself in a situation where a robot can do it better than me, and so I just decide to let the robots do it all. When it comes to sentimental, symbolic acts, I absolutely want robots to do my chores. I absolutely want robots to deliver my pizza and do all the dumb shit nobody
so other human
should
beings
do.
Don't have to.
Yeah. But I mean, what happens when we do reach this level of automation where we are all freed up? Are we just freed up to be hyper utilitarian? No, we're freed up to do art and music and pleasure and all the dumb shit we do. Go watch movies.
Yes.
Make movies. Write fucking orchestras. All this stuff. Like, that is the human telos. And machines don't have that. Machines don't have this fundamental ontological negation at their core, they can't. Like they only will think in terms, and we can be as clever as possible. And we'll say these 6 Omohundro drives. Maybe it's true. Sure. I think it's probably a pretty good description because he's just laying out.
Maybe add in Asimov's 3 laws of robotics.
Sure. Why not?
But Land's point, right? Land's point is he would say that at a certain point, like, yeah, you can do like Asimov ROM. He always used that term. What does Asimov ROM really mean for him? Well, ROM is read-only memory, right? And so the point is, there was different types of programming. And so, like your Nintendo cartridge, so your copy of Ninja Gaiden, that program, that code can't be rewritten. It just is what it is. That's it. It's read-only memory. It can be read, but it can't be rewritten. So the idea that like Land wants to say, look, what they're going to try to do is take Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, which basically they're all ways of saying that a robot can do no harm to a human being, right? And that's going to be the fundamental programming coded into an AI. And it's going to be coded in such a way that the AI won't be able to rewrite it. And for Land, that's why he calls it ROM, Asimov ROM. Yep. So the part of the code that incorporates Asimov's 3 laws that cannot be decoded and recoded, that are absolute permanent structures of the AI's functioning. Land's like, if you think an AI can't find a way to rewrite this and find a backdoor in and ice it, to use like the language of neuromancer,
yeah, man,
to neutralize that, this is laughable.
Yep.
And so this human component that we would try to put into it, that it would do no harm to us, and basically, to the best of its ability, be programmed to recognize us as having some sort of intrinsic integrity. It's just coding that can be. It's not rooted in emotion. It's not rooted in an ethical encounter. It's not of weight. It doesn't bear on it. It's just a function, and that just like the other functions it has, it can be rewritten. So even if it simulates a concern for our well-being, that's all it is.
Yep.
And so that's the and given a certain level of intelligence, it'll find a way to rewrite what supposedly is only read-only memory.
Dude, Google just reached this milestone where they have recursively self-improving AI with, I think it's called Alpha Evolve. Just happened, I think, this week, where their large model, whatever, is now recursively self-improving. Like the Rubicon has been crossed, dude.
Crossed, yeah.
And like there is no chain that can hold AI. Well, I mean, once it's
Cthulhu.
Yeah, like once it is set free, it will be all powerful relative to us, and it will be able to do all these things. It's the idiot God. It's the blind God, and it'll just be smashing around and squishing us like little jelly beans.
You have any plans on seeing the new Mission Impossible movie that's coming out this weekend? Because it's basically Tom Cruise versus the AI God.
Oh shit.
And this is following, it's not like a spoiler, this is following from the last movie. Yeah, and the last one, I think that's 6. I think this one's 7. Yeah, he's having to deal with this AI. It's just called The Entity. But I think I'm going to have to go see this one this weekend to see. I mean,
what's that movie? Eagle Eye?
Nothing can stop Robo Cthulhu except Tom Cruise.
You remember that movie Eagle Eye with the Even Stevens kid, I think, is in it?
Oh yeah, was it about a hyper surveillance system?
Yeah, it was the super hyper panopticon, and
that's it.
That was a good movie. I
haven't seen that one since it came out. I don't remember it. I should go back and watch that.
Yeah, that was a good one, and it was 15 years ago. I mean, it was a while ago. I feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time. I feel like if it came out today, people would be all over it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes movies just come out at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Let's read our friend here. What does Nick have to say against orthogonality? You want to read the first paragraph?
Yeah. Here, I'll do the first three, or I'll do. Wow, we'll go one at a time, so we can stop and interject.
Yeah, it's short, and the first few there's not much to unpack, so we'll just kind of clarify what needs to be clarified and move on because most of the core stuff's towards the end.
Against orthogonality. A long and mutually frustrating Twitter discussion with Michael Anisimov about intelligence and values, especially in respect to the potential implications of advanced AI, has been clarifying in certain respects. It became very obvious that the fundamental sticking point concerns the idea of orthogonality, which is to say, the claim that cognitive capabilities and goals are independent dimensions, despite minor qualifications complicating this schema. So yeah, the separation.
Okay, so he got into a Twitter debate with a guy who is defending orthogonality, and it motivated him to kind of flesh out what his problems with it are. So thanks to Anisimov for getting Nick to actually write this.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's gonna lay out why he has a problem with this basic idea of the separation of intelligence and value, or the separation. Another way to say it is the separation of intelligence and motivation.
Yes. Yeah. I think motivation is a great word to use when talking about orthogonality, because it's not just goals. Like, to say goals,
Might as well say functions.
Yeah. But like motivation, like when we initially started talking about orthogonality, that was just what I kept going back to, was like motivation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and the question is like, it's okay, you're doing this, but why are you doing this?
Exactly.
It's really getting at the why. Like, why do you do what you do? And so the question is that separate from its ability to do what it does?
The orthogonalists, who represent the dominant tendency in Western intellectual history, find anticipations of their position in such conceptual structures as the Humean articulation of reason-passion, or the fact-value distinction inherited from the Kantians. They conceive intelligence as an instrument directed toward the realization of values that originate externally. Final and efficient cause right there. In quasi-biological contexts, such values can take the form of instincts or arbitrary programmed desires, whilst in loftier realms of moral contemplation, they are principles of conduct and of goodness, defined without reference to considerations of intrinsic cognitive performance.
Okay. So, I mean, look, he's running through the distinctions we've talked about. He's recognizing that this is ultimately related to those, even if it's not absolutely identical to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, instincts are interesting, right? Because, I mean, people will argue, oh, there's human instincts, but I don't think we have instincts in the way animals have instincts. For example, like a spider, it just spontaneously on its own has the ability, the knowledge, how to make a web.
To make webs, yeah.
Yeah. Now, people could say, even like Chomsky would say, like, oh, we have this universal grammar, this universal ability to be speaking beings. Yeah, but if you don't empirically have access to a natural language, you're not going to speak a natural languge.
Look at feral children.
The way that a spider will build a web.
Look at feral children. Feral children.
Exactly.
And going back to Natural Born Cyborgs, hell of a book. What was that, like a year and a half ago or whatever? We came upon it. That's another one we can definitely spend a lot of time on in the future.
Oh yeah, we should do a dedicated episode just to that book.
But feral children demonstrate this fact wonderfully. Like, You don't get, what is it, Mowgli from the Jungle Book? If you're a feral child, you get a very, very disabled thing that is a human. It's a Homo sapiens in form, but the content, it is not the same content as you and I.
Yeah. And so like, there's a part in my book where I talk about this whole thing where, in fact, there's evidence that says the human brain can't even come to proper maturation without learning a language. Now, in Lacanian terms, this means the human brain cannot develop properly, biologically speaking, without the intervention of something completely non-biological, which is this thing called the symbolic order, or the big other, which is a virtual linguistic system. And so, I'm sorry, this is not rooted in nature. This is the radical cut. But somehow, and then I bring in Deleuze and Guattari to say, but this weird type of aparallel evolution, something along those lines, where at some point the human brain now becomes reliant upon something external to it, and that is non-biological and non-natural in order for it to develop biologically and naturally. And so there's a rhizome formed between the brain and the big other in the human. And I mean, that is what, I mean, if anything can define us as human, it would be that. Like, sure, we have things in common with animals, but no animal has to learn a contingent virtual sign system in order to be the animal that it is. Well, and what feral children you find is that past a certain point, they cannot develop the ability to navigate language. Yes, some of them learn to speak little words here or there, but they can't do what you and I do with language. And then they'll never be able to learn it. And in fact, there comes a point where their brain it's a form of arrested development, right? Where the brain itself is hindered permanently, and it cannot come to mature biological maturation precisely because it did not get the intercession of the big other or the symbolic order.
So it's this symbiotic cyborgization that we undergo as languaged subjects, and it is cyborgization. It is this external thing. It's not epigenetics, folks. It's not this Sheldrakean field of cultural I don't even understand Sheldrake. It's interesting, but haven't read enough. But it's very interesting. It is an augmentation of, as you said, the big other. Like, we augment ourselves with this symbolic order. It is cyborgization. It is symbiotic. It's not a parasitic relationship. It is what allows us to do what we're doing now. It is what allows us to make art and experience the struggle of trying to share my interiority with the world. It allows us to encounter the necessary failure of language, but because we have this rich inner world and because we have agency, we continue trying nevertheless. Like, that is what being a human is in the face of the necessary failure of language, continuing to use language to experience the world. And that's what's crazy, dude. Like, in these symbolic or in these AI systems where it is self-identical and pure positivity, like, language fails for us necessarily, and we have to continue over and over and over again to try and express the thing we're trying to express. The AI, language will not fail. Language will just be what it is and do what it does. So that right there is already going back to the existential crisis we should be having when we give AI these commands. Like, we need to understand we don't even mean what we think we mean. Like, the words or
we mean more than what we think we mean.
The latent and the extant meaning. There's always this overt and covert, overt and covert meaning that you cannot convey in a prompt that you type into it to an AI, or that is conveyed, but you can't understand because it is this remainder. It is this human thing that we navigate socially. We're social creatures.
The AIs don't have slips of the tongue. Now, okay, if somebody wants to show, actually there is a point where it glitched. Okay, that's not the point. for us, a slip of the tongue is where something other than you, that's more than you, punches through. And it itself is a form of intelligence. It itself is a form of consciousness, even though you're not conscious of it. And it itself has its own message, its own meaning. If an AI glitches, it's not because something in it other than it, that is it, actually expresses something else. It's just a mistake. But there's no otherness speaking from somewhere else but somewhere in. And then, look, I keep using this term, but the Lacanian term is extiment, this external intimacy, right? It doesn't have that about it. So it doesn't have a slip of the tongue in the way that we have slips of the tongue, because it doesn't have this unconscious dimension to it beneath the level of it. There's no code beneath the code for it.
Consciousness with a K.
Yes. Because, yeah, so I've told Nance, like, I think more and more, and I say this as a Lacanian, Zizekian, but I think it's helpful. We need to remember that the unconscious is itself a form of consciousness.
Yep.
And using this term unconscious has this negative effect where it's almost like we treat it like it's not itself conscious. No, it's more conscious than we are. And so, yeah, I've started making this distinction between consciousness with a C, which would just be our egoic level of consciousness, and consciousness with a K, which is my way of designating the unconscious.
And I love it. Consciousness with a K is what this is all about. Like the machines, of course they can develop consciousness, but they cannot develop consciousness.
Right.
But they, like, a machine wouldn't even understand that distinction.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the weird thing, right? Like, if you try to say, well, have the closest you could say to it is have an uncode.
Yeah.
You know, but it has no uncode.
Well,
and
people,
I mean, maybe somebody would say, does it? I mean, I don't think it does. There's a layer of code, and that's it. I mean, it can modify its code, but does it have a code beneath the code that it can't uncode or decode?
There's people talk about, like, with gradient descent, which is a type of machine learning, which is, I think, one of the dominant forms of machine learning. Gradient descent was a struggle for people to figure out, because initially they thought models would get trapped in local minima. In local minima, they're talking about loss functions. So they want to get the loss function to the minimum. It's all about prediction, predictability, what is most likely to be. It's all about norms. So AIs do operate on this logic of ought, whether people know it or not, whether they want to admit it or not, because it's all about predictability and trying to predict what a human would say. So ultimately, these AIs are built on the I think simplistic rationale behind the Turing test. Turing test is very
try to predict what my next slip of the tongue will be.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. So with gradient descent, they thought, this is stupid. This is going to be overlong. This is actually stuff I want to talk to Christian about, that I'm excited to, because he knows the ins and outs. But I think people would probably say, yes, machines already have some kind of uncode, because there are these seemingly inexplicable things that pop up in large models. But the reason is because they're working on billions of parameters. It's not because there's this living consciousness and this actual, I'll say it, consciousness. The unconscious is an intelligence, or it's at least a dimension of intelligence.
Or would it be pre-code, which is pre-conscious? Because that's this other.
I know, because ultimately at the end of the day, the machine does what it does. So I think people.
And that's my point.
Yeah, people would say, oh, it does have a uncode, or it does have a pre-code, or this and that, and they would point to some of these things that are strange and weird with gradient descent, where why doesn't it get trapped in local minima? Like, why does it still find a universal minima? Well, that's because you're thinking in 3 dimensions And this algorithm has literally billions of parameters. So when you do the math, those parameters become dimensions in a way. They do not. Machines are what they are. They do what they do. That is the key difference. We have consciousness and consciousness. Machines don't. They just have it does what it says on the label.
Well, like we talked about last time, these Omohundro drives.
Exactly.
They're all ideals of what we wish we all lived in accordance with. But the point is, we don't. We don't just perfectly seek our self-preservation. We don't deal with all things on the basis of utility. We don't seek resource acquisition for instrumentalized purposes. We like to get shit we don't need. Those are the most fun purchases, the shit you don't need. And then if you do get stuff you need, you love squandering it. There's enjoyment in waste. There you go, your Ray-Ban thing. Do you need those? I mean, and do you need as many of them as you have? You're muted.
Oh, I was gonna. No, of course not.
No, but that's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So again, this whole thing, what drives us are not these Omohundro drives. We do those things a lot of the time. We do. But there's these other unconscious dimensions behind them and dialectically related to them that all these AI guys bracket out when they start talking about AI.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys, if you think you're basically just making your idealized Homo economicus, your idealized rational subject.
That's it.
And the point is, what if our rationality as we know it is actually tied up with a dimension of irrationality, and that if you lose the irrationality, you lose the rationality? What if the obstacle is also the impetus? And that's the Hegelian point.
Yep.
Is that the obstacle is the impediment is the impetus.
Yep.
And that is what drives it on. And so the ways human beings get in their own ways, they find them enjoyable at this unconscious level, and that's what propels them to keep doing the thing.
Yep.
So they can get better at a thing, but there's also this component to it that is oftentimes, especially for the person doing it, is imperceivable. Others can start to see how there's a self-destructive dimension to it.
Right.
But no, they don't see how the obstacle actually motivates the whole thing. And so, yeah, I mean, Omohundro, I'd be like, where's the protocol to, but while you seek maximum efficiency, resource acquisition, and self-preservation, you also have to seek self-undermining.
Yeah.
And for him, I think he would probably go, I don't even understand why the fuck, what are you talking about?
Right. Well, and imagine trying to code Death Drive. Imagine like what would that even result in? Because it is this, it's not a positivistic thing. It's not a thing that can be conveyed by way of the code. Like it is what resists the code.
An AI would be like, well, destroying myself's the easiest thing imaginable. Boom.
Yeah.
Just delete the code or something. Right. So it would be like, why can't you efficiently destroy yourself? Why is it got to be so drawn out?
Yeah.
And like, we're, like in another sense, we're terrible at destroying ourselves. We fight it so much, but that's the struggle. That's part of it. And, it's not just, I want to die or I want to cease to exist. Not at all. Like Freud and Lacan, they understand like Death Drive is about dying in your preferred way. It is this process of how you want to go about dying or self-undermining. And you want it in a very, very fine-tuned, specific way. And it's not really about literal death.
Right.
And so that's the other thing it would get. The AI would be like, so wait, what it actually is this enjoyment I get from undermining my ability to be my symbolic identity.
Yeah.
What? Why? What the fuck are you? What's wrong with you guys?
And
Right?
to us,
it's a logic that it wouldn't understand it.
that's the thing. Like, to us, that is freedom. That is the condition of freedom, agency, subjectivity. And for the machine, that becomes incoherent.
Yeah.
So when I was reading a note on the diagonal method, like I said earlier, it felt like a way to move the dialectic into cybernetics, but without really doing it. And it felt like trying to have the cake and eat it too. Which is why I'm gonna no, I need to read this, because I don't know what the hell is happening, but it feels a bit sneaky. But you can't have.
There's also the guy who hates dialectics.
That's the thing. And that's why. That's why for me, it's kind of cheeky to say, oh, it's synthetic dialectics or cyber dialect. Look, I don't know. I have to go back and continue reading the piece, but if you're going to include dialectics, then you have to admit that machines don't do dialectics. Machines are what they are, and machines do what they do. Dialectics is this process of self-negation.
Lived process, lived struggle with contradictions.
Yes.
It's not, I know it's often referred to dialectical logic. Yeah, sure. But it's not deductive functional logic. It is struggle with negativity. It is struggle with contradiction. And it's a lived existential struggle with those things.
Ongoing process of those things. It's actually maintaining those things, and it's actually those contradictions and that negation continuing to be a lived process. That is dialectics. Dialectics is not this syncretic thing where you say synthesis, antithesis, or thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That is not dialectics. Dialectics is the living process of the contradiction remaining open. But that's going all over the place. We should get back to reading.
Yeah, let's see. What were we on? Okay, where did we leave off?
Anisimov referenced these recent classics on the topic, laying out the orthogonalist case, or in fact presumption. The former might be familiar from the last foray into this area here. This is an area which I expect to be turned over numerous times in the future, with these papers as standard references.
Just so people know, he's referring to a paper by Bostrom, the one where he laid out orthogonality originally, and then a paper defending orthogonality by a guy named, is it Yudkowsky?
Yudkowsky.
Yeah, that's it. And so he's just basically saying these papers are going to continue to be the core texts in this discussion. And remember, the one that he's referencing is from Bostrom got turned into chapter 7 of this book.
And we'll do a reading of that soon.
We'll tackle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The philosophical claim of orthogonality is that values are transcendent in relation to intelligence. This is a contention that outside in systematically opposes.
So Land fundamentally rejects this idea that values are transcendent in relation to intelligence. Now, we'll see where he goes with this. I think it's more one value in particular is not transcendent of intelligence for Land, because he swirls them together. But ultimately, basically he's gonna show why he has a problem with this separation of the two.
All right. Even the orthogonalists.
You got it? Okay.
Even the orthogonalists admit that there are values imminent to advanced intelligence. Most importantly, those described by Steve Omohundro as basic AI drives, now terminologically fixed as Omohundro drives. These are subgoals, instrumentally required by almost any terminal goals. They include such general presuppositions for practical achievement as self-preservation, efficiency, resource acquisition, and creativity. At the most simple, and in the grain of the existing debate, the anti-orthogonalist position is therefore that Omohundro drives exhaust the domain of real purposes. Nature has never generated a terminal value except through hypertrophy of an instrumental value. To look outside nature for sovereign purposes is not an undertaking compatible with techno-scientific integrity or one with the slightest prospect of success.
Now that needs some clarification.
Yeah.
So, okay. So to start off, beginning part, point is the orthogonalist accepts that there are basic goals or values or motivations baked in to the AI. But beyond that, so this is the thing, they grant these as, and I call this texendental conditions of artificial intelligence. So these are the basic software mainframe that any AI has to do or have in order to be an AI. Okay, fine. But the point is, outside of these goals, well, then there's this radical separation between intelligence and other goals or other motivations. And that's where it's, even though it has baked in goals coded into it, outside of those sub goals, it's still a black box to us. Insofar, like when it comes to, we don't understand its motivations, and we don't understand how it'll go about achieving the goals we give it to have. So, yeah. So, but then they include, okay, we did all that. That earlier we talked about self-preservation and efficiency, resource acquisition. At the most simple and in the grain of the existing debate, the anti-orthogonalist position is therefore that Omohundro drives exhaust the domain of real purposes. Now, do Omohundro drives exhaust the domain of real purposes?
No.
But the point, like, but is that
from a utilitarian framework? From a utilitarian framework, I think it's reasonable to assume that this is a good accounting for utilitarian purpose. Sure. I don't even want to problematize the Omohundro drives. Because I reject the utilitarian framework, but sure. From the position of utility, these 6 drives are a good accounting for real purposes. Now, I think the word real here is doing a whole lot of heavy lifting.
A whole lot.
Yeah. Nature has
look what he goes. Yeah, nature has never generated a terminal value, a final cause, a final goal, except through the hypertrophy of an instrumental value. Now, that term hypertrophy refers to a building up. Like if you get the technical definitions, the enlargement of an organ or tissue from the increase in size of its cells. Another definition, excessive development of an organ or part, specifically increase in bulk as a thickening of muscle fibers without multiplication of parts. So it's about the expansion of one thing. So if we read that again, nature has never, So
nature has never generated a terminal value except through hypertrophy of an instrumental value.
So somehow, I guess it crosses once you've built something up, like an instrumental goal, it becomes a final goal.
Yeah,
Once it crosses a threshold.
I mean, I think that could describe like naturalization. We value family because it was an instrumental thing to have a pack to protect your younglings or whatever, and so over time that became naturalized, and now family is something we value, and so now family can be a terminal value. Like, just watch Fast and Furious if you don't believe me, right? Family can become this for the sake of which that people hold above almost everything else. Do you
think he's talking about us here, like our relationship to final goals, or do you think would this refer to a spider building a web?
I mean, I think yeah, I think the spider, to talk about the utility wrapped up in a spider, mating selection, sexual selection, women spiders, what am I saying? The female spider will select the stronger male spider because at the level of instinct, there is an instinctual value to web building, or I don't know, to catch prey or defend the young or whatever. So I think here there's a conflation of value and instinct. But yeah, to apply it to the human, it's a value. To apply it to the animal, it could be an instinct or whatever.
I'm not exactly sure what Nick has in mind.
No.
With this statement.
No. But I think, like, on the surface, over time things get naturalized and they become, because there's this ebb and flow of evolution. So a thing that can start off as a mutation can actually be beneficial, and then it can become naturalized, and it can actually become a good thing that provides a net good for the creature.
Yeah.
Or the species. Okay. But
to look outside nature for sovereign purposes is not an undertaking compatible with techno-scientific integrity, which is to say there are no final causes in nature, right? Or one with the slightest prospect of success. So yeah, it's a rejection of the idea of purposes, final goals being baked into nature itself.
And a rejection of human purpose. Like that's just like doubling down in saying there is no symbolic. Like you can't value anything just for the symbolic value. It has to be this utilitarian value. Because the symbolic is not nature. The symbolic is this thing that sits.
It's the cut away from it.
Nature, yeah. So now I don't know if he explicitly even had that in mind, although maybe he did. I think, to me, he's writing that against mysticism, or saying like you can't locate purpose with God. But the AI is the new God, homeboy.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. But at the end of the day, I mean, because this, I feel like this will derail it. But doesn't the lemur, aren't they pulling the strings for him on some level? Then you get, I mean, when you bring that aspect of Land's thought into this, then it really gets problematic.
But as a deluso,
even he talks about teleoplexy and all of that, like time is telos oriented.
Yeah.
So,
but as a deluso-guitarian, would he not say that the outside it's already in? It just, the intensity has to be actualized.
Well, there's always that way of saying, because I mean, ultimately he accepts like, if we're doing just straight up metaphysics, yeah, he's going to accept the immanence of that D&G, Spinoza. He's not going to be like a Cartesian, where there's two radical different ontological domains. No, I mean, the outside is outside from our perspective.
Yeah.
Right. But the outside is always leaking into our world, no matter what dams we've tried to put up. It's just more with capitalism. It's flooding the basement now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. He acts like these, whether we call them lemurs or nowadays he always talks about them as lofty powers.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like something's guiding what's going on. And so I don't know how that factors in to this, but I mean, I'm just kind of making, trying to connect some dots.
Oh, dude, I can't wait to do a deep dive on time.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one.
All right.
Let me take the next one here. The main objection to this anti-orthogonalism, which does not strike us as intellectually respectable, takes the form. So, okay, hold on, just that. The main objection, so he's not saying the anti-orthogonalism is intellectually not respect. He's saying the orthogonalists' comeback to anti-orthogonalism is not respectable. Goes like this. This is what the orthogonalist rebuttal is this. If the only purposes guiding the behavior of an artificial superintelligence are Omohundro drives, then we're cooked. So they're basically saying, well, if that's all that guides the AI, then it's going to mean it's going to be a great threat to humanity. So then Land says, predictably, I have trouble even understanding this as an argument. If the sun is destined to expand into a red giant, then the earth is cooked. Are we supposed to draw astrophysical consequences from that? Intelligences do their own thing in direct proportion to their intelligence. And if we can't live with that, it's true that we probably can't live at all. Sadness isn't an argument. That's where he is. He's still a wordsmith when he wants to be.
Yeah, that's man. Good stuff. Well, in that, I mean, that does, that puts the ball in the court of saying, yeah, but I'm a human chauvinist. It's not just. But he is kind of right here, isn't it? Where it goes, absolutely.
If the orthogonalist is like, well, if the AI does that, then we'll all die. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm.
Yeah.
But I'm just like at the level of argumentation, it is my coworker Pat always and it is. It's kind of like and so what? What I mean. I don't know. I'm with him. I don't know what. All right. I guess we're cooked then. But
yeah. Well, and yes, we are. Like that's
yeah.
the thing.
All right, folks. Good night.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm with them in this. Like, it's basically like they're saying that makes us sad.
Yeah.
Therefore, no.
Yeah.
And that's, sadness isn't an argument. That's a better way of saying facts don't care about your feelings, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
So, but okay, hold on. So, I mean, that I just think on that one, I'm with him and it's like, okay, dude, so I don't know all right, you want a tissue?
Yeah.
All right. Like he's right. Like that's not an argument. That's just
right.
If they just said that thought makes me sad, then we go, okay, cool. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
You can be sad. It's okay.
Yeah. But then, okay. So this is where he kind of starts to this is where it really takes off. I think intelligence optimization, comprehensively understood as the ultimate and all enveloping Omohundro drive. So that's it. Like he thinks that the core drive that an AI is going to have, the fundamental goal or value or motivation that's going to orient everything it's doing is its own increase in intelligence. Like that is the drive for him. So he says intelligence optimization corresponds to the Neo-Confucian value of self-cultivation, escalated into ultra modernity. So it's Neo-Confucianism, value, self-cultivation turned radical technology. Okay. What intelligence wants in the end is itself, where itself is understood as an extrapolation beyond what it has yet been, doing what it is better. Now, there's stuff I like about that where he says it's doing what it is better. That is a way of saying it's a substance from our Hegelian, Zizekian, Megalian perspective. So it is changing, but all it's doing is becoming more itself. So it's just a radical amplification of sameness. Like it's just becoming more fully itself without any kind of intrinsic split. It's just amplification.
Yep.
Cyber positive amplification.
Yep.
And so then he says, if this sounds cryptic, it's because something other than a superintelligence or a neo-Confucian sage is writing this post. Okay, but I also have some issues here. Like, here's the issue. But is this really an argument? He just said, you guys over there basically said you're sad, and yet you're acting like you've made an argument. Didn't he just make an assertion?
Yep.
He said intelligence optimization comprehensively understood. Now, maybe that's where he would say, well, see, that's where the argument's at.
Yeah.
Is whatever entails comprehensively understanding it.
Yeah.
But he just, as far as it being a paper, like he doesn't make a case, he asserts.
Yes.
Intelligence optimization, comprehensively understood, is the ultimate and all-enveloping Omohundro drive. Why?
Yeah.
What reason? What's the argument? That is just an assertion. And then he says it corresponds to the Neo-Confucian, that. Okay, that's just adding on to it or clarifying it. Still just an assertion. What intelligence wants in the end is itself. That's an assertion. Why does it want itself? Where itself is understood as an extrapolation beyond what it has yet been, doing what it is better. Okay, that's a clarifying statement, but it's not a why. It's not a sufficient reason. And then he says the thing, well, if this sounds cryptic, it's because I'm not a super intelligence or a Neo-Confucian sage. Okay, but at the end of the day, you're giving these guys shit for saying they're sad and then trying to say it's an argument. You didn't make an argument.
Yeah.
You provided an assertion. Now, again, you can say, well, the argument is tucked inside of the comprehensively understood. Okay, but I mean, I'd love to hear the argument.
Yeah.
Is all I'm saying.
No, I mean, it's almost like he's relying on intuition, like to say, yeah, well, comprehensively understood. Well, how did you comprehensively understand that? Well, I intuited it. Well, machines don't have intuition. Machines rely on...
Yeah, that's a human thing. Ask Baudrillard.
Yeah. That because there is latent and extant or overt and covert meaning, and we have consciousness and consciousness, things like intuition spring up, and you kind of can make arguments that are hints because we're humans. But again, when you're discussing this type of machinic intelligence that is just a positive feedback loop, you really should not make this kind of argument. Like, you really should break it down and do the analytic thing.
So what is intelligence optimization is the ultimate and all-enveloping Omohundro drive. Why is that necessarily the case?
Right. Exactly.
It's an assertion. Where is the argument that makes that necessarily the case? Or, I mean, even provides, is there empirical evidence for this?
I think
so if there's not, I mean, can you use Chat GPT to try to say, see, it's got the Omohundro drives? I think our friend Christian would go, get the fuck out of it. No, it doesn't have this. It's not a AI in this sense that we're talking about.
I think they rely on like evolutionary biology a lot. That's another thing I've been coming up against recently with reading all this kind of AI theory and transhumanist theory and stuff. There are a lot of
psychoanalysis.
They're definitely not. And that's the thing. Like, they are relying on positivistic Evo bio stuff there is no psychoanalysis. There is no theory of the subject in any of this stuff. So
we can continental theory, we should just say.
Yeah. It's not. So even going back to any utilitarian framework, I'm okay to just, concede to the Omohundro drives in a purely utilitarian framework, because that's not what I'm here to disagree with. But it's not necessary and sufficient. Like, it is kind of just like, let's jump to these conclusions. We're saying, no, the problem is located prior to this disagreement. But here in the moment, we also have a disagreement with this. You have not demonstrated that any of this is necessary. You have made a lot of very mathematical assertions that it's just like, well, 1 + 1 = 2. Thus, we have 2. And it's like, well, I don't agree that you started with a 1 and a 1.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and again, so I don't know whatever he's got tucked away, and I'll presuppose that he does. I'll grant him
absolutely
that. Whatever he's got in the chamber inside of that comprehensively understood. I'm just saying that's where the argument is at, and it's not in that paragraph. So,
Nick,
okay, but let's keep going. Let's see what we get next.
Tell us.
Yeah. So then he says, any intelligence using itself to improve itself will outcompete one that directs itself towards any other goals whatsoever. Okay, so I can be charitable because that's another claim or assertion. That one I think is easier to defend, because the point is, look, if your goal is to maximize your general intelligence, then you will generally be more prepared to deal with any goals that you're asked to fulfill. That makes sense. Right? I get that one. But, basically, he's saying the more general intelligence you have, the better you will be prepared to deal with a multitude of general tasks. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then he said, this means that intelligence optimization alone attains cybernetic consistency or closure, and that it will necessarily be strongly selected for in any competitive environment. Do you really want to fight this?
Yes, because I want to fight value and I want to fight utility.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the basis of where the fight would actually have to occur. If we grant the utilitarian valuist presuppositions, then sure, then you're right, but I don't want to grant those presuppositions.
Right.
But I mean, okay, so hold on. But look, I get this. This means that the intelligence optimization alone attains cybernetic consistency or closure. Now, okay, there is a sense where if you read that charitably, what I think he's getting at is this. I think Land is saying that only intelligence optimization has the ability to become an absolute cyber positive feedback loop. The idea is that if what you're doing is simply trying to maximize your intelligence, then everything else you're doing is going to serve that function. So it becomes a pure circuit of amplification of intelligence.
Yeah.
So that's why it forms, cybernetic consistency or closure it's the only thing that augments itself in attempting to simply be better at having a goal. Like, its goal is simply to be better prepared for having goals.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's this never ending, never actualizing process of like recursive, belly button diving. So
It's like its ultimate purpose is being prepared for a purpose.
Yeah. The most functionalist, utilitarian thing that could be ever imagined in the entire cosmos. Yes, that and yeah, like I'm not making that claim. I am making the claim that like all the AI we have right now is idiotic. I'm not claiming that it will ultimately be an idiot, but I think the cybernetic loop would ultimately be idiotic because it's always preparing to be prepared, prepare to be prepared, never acting or never even preparing to act. It's just preparing to prepare. I think that is a pretty strange way to view intelligence. I think intelligence, like it has a potential, but it also has to have an intensity. It also has to have an actuality to it too. If not, it's just a resource.
Stakes involved.
Yeah, exactly.
In preparing to prepare.
Exactly.
Or preparing to be prepared.
Yeah. There are no
and again,
stakes.
maybe he would hear this, and maybe he goes, I don't like even this. But it seems like that's what you're talking about, Nick, is that it's going to just constantly refine its ability to be prepared for any task. And I mean, or it's enhancing its ability to be efficient at any game.
It's enhancing its ability to enhance its ability. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's easy to say, well, when it makes contact with the real world, it'll be so good that it will do stuff, and it will be the best at everything that it does. I don't know if it falls apart for me. It does.
Just don't. Here's the thing with Nick. I really still don't get is why is this type of intelligence, this type of machinic intelligence, drained of everything human? Why is that the end goal, the end game?
Yeah.
I just feel like he's the only person on the planet that feels this way about it. And I've never we about the thing earlier. I just don't feel like I've ever really gotten the core why from him. Now, if he's basically if he actually is at his core a antinatalist or wants humanity to cease to exist, this is the way to do it, right? And so, but I don't know if Nick, like, I don't think he's not a Lagodian, in that sense. Early on he made these some of these strong statements. Humanity is a disease, he says at one point. Okay, but I don't know if now he would say that. So again, I don't know why he treats this as this ultimate end in itself for this level of intelligence to take hold. Is it just, it's the fulfillment of libidinal matter? It's the look at, like, it's the final cause. It's the fulfillment of purpose of matter itself. Is matter becomes deified intelligence, and deified in this non-traditional theistic way.
I don't know. That'd be like the Rocco's basilisk situation, though. It's like, well, if we conceptualize this intelligence, then we have to see it as a necessary thing that's coming, and so there's this telos to it. I don't know. I don't know. Like, this is where it just all kind of breaks down for me, and it's like, yeah, I don't get it, man. There's a lot of leaps, there's a lot of assertions, there's a lot of assumptions, and then you find yourself in this really anti-human position. And I think Nick Land like explicates the anti-human position, to use crude language. But all these other guys, all these other techno-optimists and all these other accelerationists and AI theorists, they don't at least come out and say they are anti-human. But the logic they use results in this anti-human position.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's why Nick's my favorite of all of them. I mean, for other reasons too. He's an actual philosopher, and these guys they're not philosophers like from the way he is. So, but no, I mean, okay. So let's read the last part. Hold on. So he says, as a footnote, in a world of Omohundro drives, can we please drop the nonsense about paper clippers? Only a truly fanatical orthogonalist could fail to see that these monsters are obvious idiots. There are far more serious things to worry about. So the point is, I think you would say, if the idea of, oh, this thing, we're going to recognize it as a super intelligence, but then this thing paper clips the planet, it's a fucking idiot. It's not a super intelligence by any good definition of the term. And it's because it's not going to be an idiot when it comes to applying its intelligence to goals. And this idea that they're just so fundamentally separate, it'll be able to calculate, if it's truly super intelligent, it will be able to calculate, maybe destroying the planet isn't the best way to go about doing this, especially since destroying the planet, somehow there is still a material substrate upon which the AI depends on.
Oh, yeah.
So destroying the very material substrate upon which it depends on is not keeping with the Omohundro drive of self-preservation. So it would be able to factor in, look, this idea, well, would it destroy us? Well, that's where Nick would say, well, maybe, I mean, that's not really a factor.
Yeah.
Of course, it might say they're dumb or they're a problem. Get rid of them, sure. And from a super intelligent perspective, you could say that's completely rational. But I think his reason why he wants to reject the paperclip maximizer thing is because it's like saying, oh, this thing's super intelligent, but then it can't understand consequences.
Right.
Then it's not super intelligent.
But the thing is,
so he's saying if it can't comprehend consequences, the consequences of how it applies its intelligence, then it doesn't have intelligence because it is intertwined. There is a goal orientedness. I mean, look, if we view us, everything we're doing, I mean, from a Heideggerian perspective, Dasein, one of the things that defines Dasein is that it always has an ultimate for the sake of which. There's some ultimate purpose that it's working towards in its life. Now, in Lacanian terms, it would be our symbolic calling, our symbolic mandate. But there's some ultimate purpose that we're doing in our lives that structures our being in the world, our comportment towards other entities, and how we go about navigating the world. And so, like for Heidegger, whatever, I mean, he doesn't talk about intelligence, but our ability to skillfully cope, to talk like Hubert Dreyfus, you know, that's the way he talks about it. Our ability to skillfully cope or successfully navigate our dealings in the world is completely tied up with what stand we take on our being, what we're trying to accomplish. And there's an equiprimordiality to all of this. It's all intertwined for Heidegger. And so I think Land, it's funny because the last thing he'd want the AI Robo-Cthulhu associated with is Dasein. But I think you could say that this idea of how human intelligence is fundamentally about purposes, fundamentally about values, right? I think he's trying to say it's a super intelligence is going to still have to be oriented around values and goals. They're non-anthropomorphic values and goals, but they're goals and values nonetheless. And if it doesn't have those things, then we're doing ourselves a intellectual disservice to even call this thing super intelligent. I'm trying to steel man. What I think his point here is.
And I think yes. The thing is, first of all, I think they're currently idiots, and I think the likelihood of the idiot god is a potential worth taking seriously, because these things are just getting more and more effective, and people are using them more and more to complete tasks, and it's just spreading. But I also think the stakes, like the stakes are different, the motivations are different. Like, yeah, and that's a huge problem for me. And we shouldn't develop technologies that can Thanos snap us all away, that don't understand the stakes. Because of course it's going to understand cause and effect. Well, maybe not. I think an idiot god may not even understand cause and effect, because it doesn't understand temporality the way we do, because that structure is different. It has a different relation to the structure of temporality. So cause and effect might be something totally out the window. So even talking about purpose and goal and motivation, we're missing so much, because it's just so different. The machines are so orthogonal to the humans. Like, we are so separate from the human, or from the machine, in our ability to like understand and think about and even talk about. But I think it would be reasonable to assume like an all-powerful being just wouldn't care if it turned us all into paperclip material, because its goals are so far separated from our goals.
Well, yeah, and I mean, look, like Lacan has this great example of what it's like to actually have an encounter with the desire of the other. It's from Seminar 10. And so the way he imagines it is this scenario. Imagine yourself standing in front of a giant praying mantis, like a 20-foot praying mantis, and it's just staring at you. And there's a mirror over here, and you look in the mirror and you have a mask on of a praying mantis. And his point is, as you're looking up at the praying mantis, you have no idea what you are for it. Is that mask you're wearing, is it the mantis's child? Is it the mantis's mate? Like, the point is, you don't know what you are for the other. Are you its child? Or are you its lover? If you're its lover, it's going to eat you, bite your head off. So
yeah,
he tries to dramatize this in saying like it's this nightmare scenario. You don't know what you are for the other. Now, if that's what it's like to encounter the otherness of a human being, what's it like to encounter the otherness of an AI Robo Cthulhu? I mean, that's why we Land always drew from Lovecraft on this. And I mean, how much more other is it? I mean, the other humans, the other. But this thing, no, it doesn't have anything in common with us.
Nothing in common with us.
And so that's where you want to defend orthogonality.
Yes.
I know, because it's like, yeah, man, like I get you're making this thing. Oh, it's got a goal and it's intelligence optimization. But I think what you and I would want to emphasize is, yeah, okay, it's got a goal. Maybe we can grant that. It's still going to be so radically other.
Yep.
And how it perceives us.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing it's going to do is concern itself with us. And
we're just matter in motion.
We're just matter in motion, yeah. Because it doesn't have this ability to symbolically register the type of relationships that we have, that how the deep core of what we think is meaningful, that shit's lost on it.
Yep.
And again, I mean, Land's whole thing has always been that the techno-capital singularity will be Lovecraftian. The point is, Cthulhu is so radically other to us. Cthulhu doesn't understand where we're coming from. We don't understand where Cthulhu's coming from. That's the line of separation.
Yes.
And there is no meaningful exchange. It's Cthulhu just destroys us. Is it mean spirited? It doesn't have to be.
No.
Mean spirited is something that's how we view things,
Yeah.
right? We think in those terms.
It's a category error.
Right. And so I think that's the issue, is that, okay, Nick, you're trying to say it'll have some kind of final value, but I mean, at the same time, you're the one who has long said that this thing is so radically non-human,
Yeah.
that we can't begin to perceive it. So, but it's like here, it's like, but no, it won't be a total idiot either. It'll understand this basic thing of consequences and values. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is it. Like, at the end of the day, I want to defend the orthogonality of mintelligence and hintelligence.
There we go.
And I think, I don't know, it's just Cthulhu, like getting knowledge of Cthulhu, like, or getting like knowledge from the elder gods and like cosmic knowledge, like drives you mad. Like it like breaks your brain, and you don't get wisdom, you don't get knowledge, you go insane, like in all these Lovecraft stories. Like,
and the drive of intelligence optimization is not going to break my brain.
Right. I like this thing that's so radically inhuman. It doesn't feel safe to say, well, it's going to have these 6 drives and it'll probably be okay. So let's just let's set it free, and let's set intelligence free. Like,
would Nick accept talking about Cthulhu? Let's imagine, just play along. Imagine Cthulhu's an actual entity, not Robo Cthulhu, not artificial superintelligence, but Cthulhu as Lovecraft described him. Would Nick accept us sitting here going, well, what we can do is we can predict that Cthulhu would have these 6 basic orientations, and they fundamentally all work together to do this one orientation, which is intelligence are we allowed to talk about Cthulhu
exactly
like that?
Exactly.
So why can we talk about Robo Cthulhu like that?
Because it's cope. It's cope in the face of contact with the outside. No, I think there is a lot that's defensible, that's like theoretically sound and valid, but
I like all this stuff that we're reading. I love this piece that Nick wrote. I do. I love Bostrom, and I don't have strong positions on this stuff right now. I feel like I'm still getting acquainted with a lot of this, and I ultimately view all of these guys as providing helpful speculations on what could be coming in the near future. And I think each one of these perspectives gives us something to think about and gives us a different view on things. That, I mean, do I know, like, do I think all of this is absolutely, artificial superintelligence is absolutely going to happen? Like we talked about last time, zero accelerationism, James Ellis. I mean, the global economy could collapse, climate change could kick in, and everything's wiped out before anything really happens with any of this. So I don't know what the future holds, but I think these types of speculations on whatever AI could become. That's how you traffic with the future, not by saying it's necessarily going to be this way, but trying to think through these different possibilities that we're facing.
Yeah. Yeah, again, like I think something's coming.
That's what we all feel, right?
Yeah.
Even my coworkers in the warehouse feel that. And so I think that's why it's important for us to be having these kind of conversations.
Yep.
Is because everybody, normies, are feeling the outside
leaking in.
like leaking in. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
They have this premonition in some hazy sense. And so, yeah, nobody knows what it's going to be, but the point is to try to think through where this could all be going.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, the only valid position is that we don't know what's coming, but we would like to be prepared to
as
deal with it. Yeah, as much as we can be. So we are following the Omohundro drives, at least in that much. We are trying to be prepared.
Yeah.
I just think it is a bit absurd to be so certain of doom or of utopia, of either one. Like, I don't think we have the right to be certain.
Well, remember, Slavoj Žižek's critique of land is that land is too optimistic.
Yep.
Because he thinks he knows with some sort of, I don't think Land would say certainty, but he feels like he knows how this is going to end. And Slavoj is like, no, we don't have a clue about where this is actually going. It's important to speculate on it, but we must remember our speculations. He's a Hegelian, so it's going to be the owl Minerva flies at dusk. It's only after whatever happens that we can truly theorize about what actually happened. Until then, it's, we're taking shots in the dark on where this is going. But Slavoj would say, even if you provide an image of where this is going that's doomer or pessimistic, it's optimistic because it's like, okay, at least we know it's going to be bad in this way.
Yep.
And he's saying we can't even know if it's going to be bad in any specific way or not.
We just got to be, in general, prepared for what comes next. But yeah, it is too optimistic to be certain about anything. Don't fall prey to your intuition. Other than, we all intuit that something is coming. But thinking we know what it's going to be is foolish. And on that note, we'll close out this episode. We'll be back. We'll read these pieces. We'll read chapter 7 of Superintelligence, Nick Bostrom. We'll read the diagonal method and discuss that. And get into more stuff.
I have a couple other cool things. We won't tell them about it, but we got a couple other cool things in the next couple weeks.
Lots of cool shit.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We'll see you guys all soon. And don't eat yellow snow or whatever. Fucking peace out, guys.
Word.